Раз, раз. Hello, guys. We're gonna to start this presentation. Have fun. Yeah, please, welcome.
Endpoint is the first script where every request will be opened for each request from user. This entry point can be two-way. The first way, server push, when you have Apache and Nginx or light HTTPD, it's the most common way, everyone know about it. And another one is they call it server pull. It's popular in Node.js, sometimes in Python, in Ruby, when your script have event loop. So the first one, it's looking like usually index.php in the decrypt folder. The second one, you usually have the server PHP with the loop. First one have the short life cycle, so every request to the framework is end at the PHP is gonna die at the end of the request. And second one have infinite loop. First, easy to use, everyone know how PHP working, and for the second one, you will have a lot of performance because you don't need Nginx, you don't need to initialize all the resources, all the caches, and others. And for the entry point, the main goal is to create some global variables like server, request, post, get. And entry point just run, creating the request object, and run the next router component to build your response and send back response. And for the script pool, server pool, or script pool version, your script just doing nothing until new request will come. So it just have infinite loop and while true cycle, and that's all. The next component is quite common and understandable for everyone. It's router and dispatcher. Actually, router and dispatcher is the perfect couple because it looks like easy. You have a router, object, some object, and you run the method dispatch with your request. So sounds easier. And router always know where to send the user request. The great example is the PHP Liga package router. It have, I think, 100 lines of code. It's total router, and I think it's based on the Nikita Popov PHP router. It's most faster router in the world, as I know. And a couple words of the router and dispatcher. This is just a two functions together. One first function is the route function. It just provides the list of router. In Drupal, everyone saw the module routers YAML file, and the router function just collect all these YAML files and build the list of the routers. And dispatcher function is simple switch case. Actually, it's a switch case which selects the best router from YAML files. And after router detect where you should send to, it runs a controller component. It's, I think, the most popular place in the project, controllers. And who can show me that example of any controller? Guys? Yeah. Just say how controller looks like.
It's just a PHP script which grabs class, which grabs the data from input and sends something, prepare for some other components.
Yeah, it's. I know that that experiment developers know it, but I just want to show it's. Yeah, it's a simple function. And controllers also know as action, also know as handlers, depend on framework and their naming convention. And sometimes controller have a lot of logic, and I think everyone saw the controller on the 5,000 line of code in the project, and it's mass, it's from Drupal 6, and yeah. And what controllers should do, they should collect the response, that's all. They should not even more. And usually runs tweak or another HTML renderer template, or just print JSON for the API. And controller, it's a legacy of MVC approach. Everyone knows what's MVC. I really don't like MVC, but controllers, it's just C from MVC. So for now, I have more lines of code. It's an example of simple PHP framework, micro framework. So that's all, and you can use in your new project, and based on that, I can explain it quickly. We have routers with a route and function. We have dispatcher, just switch case, and we run router with the dispatch, and that's all. So that's a micro framework, and some of micro framework in PHP was really looks like this one. Okay, and for the request, you need to have the clean URLs extension in Apache. So going forward, the next component is configuration component. In Drupal, configuration, it's an entire ecosystem. It's a big one and really important one. But in most of frameworks like Symfony itself, it's just a PHP arrays. It's really PHP arrays. And usually in code, you will see something like that, including some config PHP file with array to config object. And that's all. It's just key-value storage. It's easy to modify, easy to use, easy to cache. And the good example of PHP array-based configuration is from the end. It can be cacheable, and it's easy to use, and I prefer it more than Symfony, actually. Next component is render component. Render is everything about generating of HTML. PHP was built as a system for generating HTML. It's just a code generator, and it was the first version, and that's cool. And still PHP is working the same way. And as you can see, we have some view object, usually, or tweak object, doesn't matter. We have the render function. And in the render function, it can be HTML file, it can be YAML file, it can be just a string with the parameters, and we pass the parameters inside. So that's what about render is. And the templates or render itself is the second popular place or worst place in the project, because when you need to fix some problem on the UA and client want to fix it ASAP, you trying to find where is it in the templates, you add in some condition, if else, another if else, and you fixed it. That's all. And some views, some tweak templates can be also thousands of line of codes. And the great example, as I love, it's Mustache. It's a template engine which works with actually all the languages in the world. It's actually working with the assembler. Yeah, that's cool. But it's not so powerful like Tweak. And in Tweak more powerful, but this one is more simple. Yeah. So, and a couple words for the renderer. It's hard to avoid ton of logic. I love the Mustache library because it have only if else and loops, and that's all, and simple variables. But for the Tweak can have some filters, Tweak can have some plugins, and so on. And your Tweak file can be really complex, and no one except you understand it. So PHP is always about rendering of templates. That's the past. Usually templates have only simple variables, but that's usually. But sometimes you'll have a really complex hard templates, and you need to refactor it and split by simple templates. in work cases contains other function like host templates. It's when you're using include in the tweak. Or for WordPress, if someone knows what WordPress is, they have database query in templates. It called it get post or load post, but yes, and or database query. And render is the second legacy part of MVC, and we can't get rid of this right now. So MVC is still there. The next component, databases. It's the most complex component for every system because it's really hard to understand how they should work. And I will just quickly explain that databases can be, it's called database abstract level, DBAL. But there is a lot of patterns about ORM, active records. Drupal have some similar way to between active records and ORM. It have a storages, it have some complex, for example, node load. It's a part of active record when you can just make the database query from your model. And entity storage is a part of ORM because you have separate storage class. And in Symfony, it's most used is Doctrine ORM. In Laravel, it's Eloquent ORM. In UE framework, it's Active Records model, and in Ruby on Rails framework, it's also Active Records. In Django, it's ORM. So it looks like there you have some database or ORM or storage. You call the persist and pass your object that you want to store. That's all. Client's codes, it never be simpler than this. And all the content, everything that you want to change from your GUI, all dynamic content should be stored in database. Please don't store the dynamic content in files, in XML, in config. Everything that should be changed, it should be stored in database because database are best for it. And the, I think, popular example is Doctrine ORM. If you never worked with Doctrine, I advise you to start to work because it's a really good project. It's one of the best projects in PHP, so just check it. And the, I think, last popular component is service controller or container. And service container, it should know about all the services in your code. Everything that you want to define, it should be defined there. So interface of container is simple. It have a get and has method. That's all. And few points. It also can be service manager. It's more complex container because service manager can initialize your service. It can discover your services, and it's a really complex solution for service container. What all it's doing is just sticking together all the services. It's usually looks like single total pattern. If you don't know what's patterned, in the parallel, we have presentation about patterns from Olga Rabadze. So I think you can ask her. It's just immutable arrays. And service containers sometimes responsible for creating new services, like in Drupal, and sometimes not. And it's right now it's the most popular way how to define new services in your code. And most of I think all the PHP frameworks, not the PLSP, have their own service container. And some frameworks like Spring in Java, they was built on the service container, and after it was a big framework. And the great example is from the Silex framework. Silex framework, I think, is dead right now, but they have a Pimple container service manager. It's a simple one, it's easy to use, and it have a lot of features that Drupal doesn't have, and that's cool. So let's check the complex example. A lot of codes here. You should not really look in this code, I just explain quickly. We have a container with a list of services like config, database, and view. We have a configuration, just a PHP array, and we have a router with params, which returns the user if it exists in database. And after that, in the router, we call the container, get view, render the username. And this is an example of the site based on our simple framework. That's all. And some of the framework, like Silex, it works that way. Some new popular framework in Python, microframework work exactly this way. And I think that's the future. So, and cool feature is to have lazy initialize for the services. But we have this feature in Drupal 8.6, I think. And I want to explain a more complex example. It's component which responsible for permission access control list. It's like a permission in Drupal. And this component actually interacts with all other components because you need to check permission when you open the site, you need to check permission before editing the content, you need to check permission before doing some third-party API calls. It should reset current user, should read some configuration, like we have the configuration, what user roles, what they can do. And we need to ensure that current user have the right permissions and should pass or deny access. Again, I really love the Zen framework, and they have all the basic components there, and it's more simple to understand than Symfony 1, because they trying to make some simple components to be understandable by everyone. And the example of access control list is in configuration we have admin role and user role. Admin role can view and edit the content, user role can view the content. And for the container, we define the ACL service. It's just a simple function which accepts the user and permission. We load in the user from database, and we load in the ACL configuration and checking if its current permission is allowed for the user. And that's all. It sounds really simple, and user has permission function from the Drupal core and so on, but it actually should be integrated on all the part of your framework. If you open any Drupal controller, any Drupal component in the core, you will see that permission check is, I think, each 5 line of code, you will see at least one permission check, because it's really complex one. And when the user opens the admin URL, if I go to login page, we need to affect the router with permission check. Next, if has edit access, we should show the form. We need to affect the controller with permission check, and we need to provide to render the permission check. So access control list is everywhere in the framework, and it passes through the entire application. So each component should interact with it. So the entire component is a really growing complexity, because, for example, it's a really small, but I'll say it for you. We have component access, action, Ajax, annotation, archive, asset, blah, 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 a lot of components. It's the list of components from Drupal 8, actually. And I think that's not the finished list, because actually maybe we lost something. What's the components like in Drupal and in other framework? Who know what's space error? Sort of, yeah. For people who doesn't know, we need to check it. You need to check it, because it's actually the standard in PHP. It's just recommendation, but right now it's standards. And cite PHP framework intertop group org. What's the purpose of PSR? It's make code understandable. Because before the PSR, all the frameworks, they was different. They was really different, with different naming convention, with different config. And after PSR, we can reuse the component from different frameworks. It's easy to integrate, extend, unify, and etc. And achievement of PSR, just list of interface. If you know the login interface in Drupal, request interface object, container interface, event dispatcher interface, cache interface. So the PHP group, PSR group, they just defined the interfaces for interaction. And based on these interfaces, our other developers built their own component. And we actually can reuse this component between different systems. That's why Drupal built it on Symfony. That's why we have all the Symfony framework have half of packages from the Zen. That's true, and because everyone want to create the reusable code and share it. And we can use keyword in auto loading in namespace, because thanks to PSR, they just created the one auto loading standard for all the packages. Because if you remember, when Drupal community tried to release the Drupal 8 first version, we doesn't have the SRC folder in each model. We have a library, Drupal model, some complex. Everyone who worked with the Drupal 8 on the early stage should remember it. It was hard to import any class from the component. And PSR achievement is the coding standard. Right now, Drupal have their own coding standard, like 2 spaces instead of 4 and so on. But in the all other PHP world, we have the one coding standard, call it PSR coding standard, PSR 2 and 1. And maybe in the future, we'll see some common service factory. If you know, if you're using in Drupal some third-party library like or like Twitter library, you need to create your service, write your own code to make the bridge between Drupal and between third-party component. But in the future, PHP framework group discussing some common way, like guys in Java have in Spring, to initialize all services. So, for example, I wish to install new component. I need to put compose required Twitter API, PHP Twitter API, and that's all. And I can use it in Drupal, but right now I need to write a lot of code there. And yeah, it will allow package maintainer decide to how initialize their services. The last important thing that I want to discuss with you is the HTTP message flow. Remember, 5 minutes ago we discussed access control level component, and who can say how permission check increase the complex of our site? Who can say it? Everyone worked with the permission in the Drupal. And if you need to add some similar component, how you can say how much time for your client? How you can say for your client how much time it will take you to, I think, rebuild or build the permission component? Actually, no one knows, and so am I. I can't predict how much time it will take for me to integrate some new component into Drupal core to affect an other component. So that's the problem. And to solve this problem, smart people came with request-response flow. If you worked with the HTTP kernel in Drupal, from HTTP kernel from Symfony, you saw the HTTP kernel object, you saw the request object, you saw the response object, and it's also knows middlewares. Smart people understand that we have some flow when user sends a request, one component proceeds the request, second component proceeds the request, third component created the response, next component proceeds the response, the last component did something with the response and returned it to user. So we call it middleware. We have the request, we have response, we have some application code like simple control, and we have a lot of middlewares. So middlewares, it's cache middlewares. When user sends a request, cache middleware asking, if I have this request in cache, if yes, I can return it from the cache. If not, I can ask application to create the response. I will store it to the cache and send the response, and next time it will be from the cache. And we have a lot of middlewares. And in the PHP community, only the lazy people did not talk about the middlewares for the last couple of years. And you may see this example. We have a lot of requests for like for the login. User sends the first request, login middleware asks it, is it the new user or he have a session? If he have a session, then we need to log or aus middleware, and we have a lot of middlewares here. And this middleware approach, it looks like abstract syntax tree, but more abstract. What is AST? If you don't know, just check a little. It's really a cool way to develop all complex system. And if you type in Google middleware and open the pictures, you'll see a lot of funny pictures about the middleware. And for me, it's not even funny, because a lot of people talk about middleware, but still no one understands how they should work. And actually, middleware is this is the one way how to build complex application, like request response, like some, for example, hooks in Drupal. They should be changed. And actually, there is other way to build it through the event subscriber and through the event model. like event manager, like you work it in jQuery. jQuery is an example of an event manager. So you can rebuild all the middleware for HTTP kernels and make it events. But you don't want to do it because it will be more complex, and if you write it at least the one code of jQuery code, everyone knows that jQuery is a mess. jQuery, all jQuery sliders and code, they actually like spaghetti code, and no one understands what the flow they have. So at least with the middleware, we have some strict flow how request and response should be created. And for the event manager, it's not, you don't want to do it. Actually, it's not the spoiler. I didn't solve last episode, so don't worry. And middleware can be good, can be bad, but it's a middleware. You should understand it and love it. And I hope in the future we can rebuild the Drupal hooks, at least with the event manager, or better with some middlewares. And for example, Zen framework, the last version, they actually rebuilt all the hooks. They created the middleware for each hook, and it's predictable, it's simple, and right now that's the better way how to create some extendable system. So it was really quickly, that's all. Let's chat.
Hi, thank you. You mentioned that you don't like MVC pattern. What other pattern can be a replacement for MVC, and what can be used for Drupal, for example, in some particular cases? Thank you.
First, I will start what's wrong with MVC. MVC was built 30 years ago for the desktop application, when your view component can be reloaded instantly. You don't need to ask user browser to make a new request to reload view pattern. And in VC, it's great pattern, but not for the not the backend application, like server backend application. It's cool for the React application, for the front end, when your model, when you view, it's instantly reloaded. And you don't need to push some data to the view. You don't need to make database query from the view. You just reload it every time when new data is arrived. So for the React, for the Angular, MVC is the better way. For the server-side scripts, when you have some user request and user response, actually, I think the best one is to get rid of all the templated and build the templates on the front end, like decoupled. Yeah, it will be more easy, because if you look deeply, the entire process between user request from the browser and server response, it's totally bad. For example, forms. Everyone knows how form works, because forms is the base of user interaction. And for example, forms right now, really bad decision to make some request from the browser to the server, because we have post, we have get, some two different workarounds. Some form elements, for example, you have the input element, form input element. And who worked with the Drupal input, you know that if you have two same input on the site, for example, you have the not form, it has the save value and cancel value. These both input have the same name, and they have the translatable value, because if input element have the value, this value will be shown on the front end. So you need to translatable value. And if value is translatable in the server code, you need to check if the submitted value, translatable submitted value, should have the same translatable text. And it's a headache. And the problem is MVC in the web, that you need to somehow pass the new parameters into your templates. So you can't just change the state of component like in React. You need to call the view renderer, render the same view with new parameters. Or you need to say the user HTML tweak template, get from the database new username. So, and the problem in this code for interaction, you need to define, or your controller will have 1,000 lines of code, or your view will have 1,000 lines of code. And no normal way, that's the first problem. And the second one is your view will not be updated fastly. You need to wait between user do the first request, then you render him some form, and user should do the second request. And the problem is that on the backend, the first request for the showing the form, it will end, it will die. And for the new request, you need to initialize the same state that was on the first request. And for example, for this problem, in the form state component in the Drupal, all the form status are stored in the database temporarily. And that's the problem. Why we need to use why we can't use this some form state to keep it in memory until the next request. We need to finish our scripts, we need to store some data, that's why single page application will be better, because to initialize this new data, you need to have some cache for forms, and in the front end, you don't need even to create session for user. It's a session created by browser, but in the backend, to store some form, you need to initialize session for each user, you need to store cache, and all the users on the site which need to submit form or just open the form, they are not anonymous. You need to, you can't use some easy application, and you need to have some better database, bigger database for that, and that's the problem. Yeah. Other way for MVC, decoupled, normal way. The first one, just get rid of all the form processing on the backend, and make the rendering on the front, and they have the cool MVC. Okay, another way without decoupled, I know that no one loves the JavaScript, so am I, and API, for example. For the API, we don't have MVC, and all the API requests, they can be immutable. So if I mean that every time when you're doing the same GET request, every time you will have the same response, and you can easily cache it even on the varnish level. So, and in that case, when you don't need to have templates, you will not have the view component in MVC. It's not totally, and actually, somewhere in the start I mentioned that controllers also call it action or handlers. In the other frameworks where they get rid of MVC, they call it control actions. And you have router action procedure. So you have a router and you have an action. Action is not the controller of MVC. They not control everything. They just call some next flow, some next services. And it's just state of mind how you build your component. Because if you want to be MVC, if you don't want to build MVC at bad way, don't put a lot of code in controllers. They actually should just, I think, get some service response and render the view, and that's all. So, yeah, it's quite hard theme to discuss, and I can advise to check Anthony Ferreira's blog. It's one of the PHP developer. It's in core team, and he have a lot of articles about MVC, MVVC, and other way how to build the frameworks. Anything else? I know this morning, yeah. Okay.
So, did you take a look on the Laravel framework?
Yeah.
And do you like it?
No.
No? Why?
It's not obvious. Laravel framework built it on one pattern. It's called facades pattern. It's a PHP pattern, and the main problem that you don't even know what the code you're going to run in your controller. You don't even, for example, simple router script for the Laravel from the tutorial. You have a route PHP file without any documentation, without anything. You need to run some variables called router. You don't even know what's the object inside, and you will never know what's the object inside, because facade pattern allows you to replace this object, router object, with another one, with another method. And when I tried to build my first Laravel application, I opened the documentation that said, in the router script, I need to create variable router, just use variable router, and run the method get or run the method post. I even don't have this method in autocomplete in PHP Storm. And when I create this method, I enable Xdebug to really track what's going on. And I found that it's not totally obvious. It's never obvious in Laravel how it worked. And for me, it's nonsense. I don't know why other people love when framework is not obvious.
Yeah, if you don't need to into it. It's very cool. It's very elegant.
Try to use Zend framework. This is one. It's really elegant because, for example, Drupal have plugin API. Yeah. Do you know who just minded this how plugin should work? First, when I saw that plugin API in Drupal, I saw that's a cool one, plugin extendable and so on. And after that, I saw it a lot where I saw it before, and I remember I saw it in Zend framework too. Exactly same plugin abstract plugins and the same plugin interfaces, really the same interfaces. And Zend, for example, Zend framework, new Zend 2 and new Zend framework, Zend Expressive, it really looks really well because when you're trying to read this code, even on the interface level, you understand how it works. They actually try to do it more obviously as they can. And when you running just every new function that you run, it's more obvious how it works even without digging inside, without opening. And with Laravel, one problem, it's not obvious at all. And they trying to achieve the same goal like UE framework tried to achieve 7 years ago. When UE framework comes, I tried to build some application. I built a cool website, and I found the one problem. UE framework is really easy to use, but you never understand what's going inside. And when you're trying to build a big application like having Drupal, you never know what's going on, what's the problem you'll have. And for the Laravel, the same problem. They trying right now all the new package for Laravel, for the new functionality, they hardest to implement for them. It's, yeah.
Okay, and can you suggest any micro framework?
I suggest to build your own. For example, you can get some Symfony Service Manager. It's really obvious with YAML file. You can get the PHP Liga router. It's built on the Nikitas Popov fast route from PHP. It's a simple one. You can get some Doctrine. I suggest to use Doctrine ORM and everything will be sticked together to the composer. And you'll have you just need to create some index PHP file with the running, passing the config and so on to the service container. And it's really easy to build your own framework based on components. First, you don't need to build your own components. They already built it. And second one, when you will try to use all these components, you will see that your framework looks like exactly the Symfony, Zend, UE, and so on. They will be similar, really. And you will see that your SRC/controller, RCC/model will be the same like in all the Symfony sites, yeah.
So it's better to use some components from other frameworks than use some opinionated version of the micro framework.
If you clearly understand what's the goal of your new site, you will see what the components you need here. For example, in Drupal, we have a really complex router structure with the pattern aliases and so on. If for the new site you don't need to store dynamic alias in database, why you don't need this complex router? Use just config-based router. That's all. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And some other guy, yeah.
Hi. So I heard you were suggesting building a single-page application, right? And moving your data processing to backend and bringing your application logic and rendering to front-end, to JavaScript, right?
View logic, mostly, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, and you were suggesting also form processing on front-end and using backend just as API for data transition and storage, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so...
But sorry, it's not for the simple sites, it's for the complex solution.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so so backend is used for data processing and frontend is used for logic and rendering.
For UI, mostly for UI logic, not the all logic, yeah.
Okay, so how is that actually different from MVC? In this approach, your backend becomes a model and your front end becomes a view and controller.
May I ask a question? How you understand the MVC? The main question, do you think that model should be contain business logic or the controller one? Can you answer?
Well, it really depends on your data. So
Yeah.
the model should validate data and probably sometimes do something. You never know whether this particular part of logic comes to model or controller.
Example, forms in Drupal. In Drupal, model have their own validation rules, like, I don't remember how they call it, just some validation rules, and forms have their own validation rules. So we have the half of business logic in controller, another half of business logic and model. And no one knows where exactly some business logic should be. And the problem is current in VC that application right now is really hard and they're complex. They have a ton of logic, and all the UI related thing you need to store in the. For example, you're right that some depends on the data. Some business logic should be in the front view, because if user checks the checkbox, require checkbox, if it's not filled, then it should show the error. But when you trying to provide a lot of rules with same checkbox, and on the backend validation front end, your logic will be everywhere, and you need a lot of resources to fix some problem. And I just want to propose to split the logic of UI elements when they just interaction with user, and logic of storing the data. It's not really the MVC, because you will have a lot of controllers on front end, a lot of controllers their own, and a lot of action controllers on the back end, but you don't need to put any logic there. So it can be called it's not MVC, but maybe model. You will have two models, one on the front end, one on the back end, but it's
similar to what EE1 had. They had validation rules which apply to both backend and front end.
Yeah, all the framework. What I suggest is just split your MVC on front end and split your data storage and some processing on the back end. And on front end, you will have the exactly MVC where it's easy, simple, and you know how to work with it. On the back end, you will have only some maybe model level, data level validation, not some business logic, data level validation, and some rules, the exact business rules, like when you saving new user, you need to send a mail, like this one, split it to the different services. So it's not the normal MVC, because in that case, models on the front end, they really will be different than those on the back end, and it's not the MVC in initial way, so it's something complex.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
I think I don't answer on your question, but I think we can talk about it later. It's a really complex question, and no one knows how to do it good, how to do it better. That's why we have a lot of front-end frameworks.
Okay, guys, I believe we finished. If you like to ask some other questions, you can chat in the hall with Alexander. And thank you, Alexander, for your participation in DrupalCamp.
Oh.
Yeah, it's for you. Yeah, we will have 10 minutes break, and after that it will be progressive web applications for Drupal, reliable, fast, engaging. Please join. Thank you very much. See ya.